Welcome back to our React series, and in this tutorial we'll be using useState. The useState is a React hook that allows you to store the state of a component in functional components. React has two types of components. One is class components and the other is functional components, which is what is preferred and what we will use throughout our tutorial. Today, we'll be using the useState hook to build a simple editor that allows us to edit the text in our React component. At this point, we have already installed React and Tailwind CSS. If you are unclear as to how to get to this point, click on the link in the video to learn how to install React and use Tailwind in your project. So let's begin by creating a folder in our source directory, and we'll name that folder Components. Now within our Components folder, let's go ahead and create a file named editor.jsx, and within that file we can go ahead and lay out our component. So this would be our editor component. Now back to our app.js file, we can go ahead and import our editor component by typing import editor from and the path to our actual editor component. Now the only thing we're going to return within the app component would be the editor itself, the editor component. So we're going to return it by typing return editor. Now if we take a quick look in our browser, we can see that our browser returns our editor component. So let's navigate back to our editor component, and we're going to first style our editor component using our Tailwind CSS classes. So let's go ahead and remove the text here, and we start with class name equal, and we're going to use some of our Tailwind CSS class. So within our quotes, we're going to start by typing MT, which stands for margin top. Then we do a width of full, and we see MD, and we see with a width of 1/3, which means that our component will occupy 1/3 of this space. And we have a spacing X of 10, and we have a padding left of 8, a flex, so it will be a flex container, and we'll do justify between with a background of white, a height of 20, and we'll set the items to be centered with a large shadow, and our component would have basically rounded borders. So rounded would be set to large. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what we have so far. And that's what we have so far, not bad at all. But let's go ahead and create a wrapper around our div. So we create a next div, and we give it a class name of container, and we'll go ahead and set it to margin X MX auto. So we'll make our margins auto, and with a padding X of 4. Alright, so let's go ahead and close up our div at the bottom here. Right, so right now we have created a container for our component. And here we have our component occupying 1/3 of our screen. So we can now get back to our editor component, and in our editor component we can create a label, and within that label we add a span and we give it a class of block, and within that span tag we add the text name. Next, we create our input, that will be our text input box, and we give it a type of text. We also give it a value, but for now we will give it a value of an empty string. We will also give it an unchanged property, and we'll set that unchanged property to a arrow function. Later on we'll go ahead and define that function. Lastly, we just need to close our input element. Next, below our label, we'll go ahead and add a button, and that button will be used for toggling back and forth between displaying our text and editing our text. We will again use Tailwind CSS classes to define our button, to define the button style. So use flex, so we make it a flex container, and we add rounded to full. We give a padding X of 6 and a padding Y of 1, and we set the margin Y to auto, and we give it a background color of blue, and we set our text to white and our font size to semi-bold. Now let's take a quick look and see what our button looks like. So as you can see, we have a nice rounded blue button with the text edit in the center. Now to store the state of our component, we need to import useState from React, and because it's not a default export, we can put it between curly braces. Next, within our component, we invoke the useState and we assign it to two variables. The first variable's value will store the actual state, and set value will be the function used to change the state of the value. We will again store a next piece of state, and this state we will call editor visible, and this piece of state will determine if the editor is visible or not. useState takes one parameter, and that parameter is the default value, and in that case we will set our default value to false. So here within our component, we can use a ternary operator to check whether our state is set to true or false. And in this case, if our editor visible is set to true, we display our label along with the input box. However, if it's set to false, we display the value. which is the text that was previously entered. So at this point, we can go ahead and cut everything from our label to the closing label, and we can go ahead and paste it within our ternary statement between our first pair of brackets. And in our second pair of brackets, we can go ahead and create a span and add our variable between a pair of curly braces. In doing this, whatever is stored in our variable will be displayed to the user. Again, let's quickly jump to a browser and see what we have so far. So here we have our input box, and then we have our label with name. Note that to get our label and our input box displayed, I had to set editor visible to true. Right, so our default state was set to true. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of style to our span. So we set it to flex, and we set the item to center, and the text, we set the text to 2XL. We assign an onClick event to our button, and we assign that event to toggle editor, which is a function that we will define above. So in the function definition of toggle editor, we use the function setEditorVisible to set the state of our variable toggle editor. Now if you notice, we have an exclamation mark followed by editor visible. What this does is return the actual opposite of the variable. So if editor visible is set to false, the return will be true, and if it's set to true, the return will be false. So in that sense, we have a toggle action. Now if we go back to our button, we can go ahead and remove the hard-coded text, and in place we can put our variable, which is edit visible, and we can set up a ternary operator. We can use a ternary operator here, and then we can say if edit visible is true, then display done, or else display edit. And if we now take a look at the browser, we can see our toggle feature is actually working fine. In our input element, we want to set the property of value to be equal to the variable name value, which holds the state. And on change, we want to go ahead and set the value using our setValue function, and we can set it equal to the value in the target input field. And if we go to a browser, let's go ahead and add some text. So we type quick nuggets, and then we click done, and as we can see, it shows us exactly what we have stored in our state. And then we can go ahead and click on that button to edit and type something different and click done. So here we have it. We were able to use the useState hook in React to store the state of our component. If you enjoyed this tutorial, feel free to give us a like and subscribe for more of these React tutorials. Until next time, thank you for watching.